Yeah, it's an analogy that I don't know if I can do it. Like,
it's sensitive.
Well, because we're talking about this in a way where, hey everybody, welcome to another Inside Tabletop. we used a very colorful analogy for talking about today's topic. Yeah.
Just a couple of guys on the sidelines.
Taking shots and feeling like we're not allowed to. It's funny. So today we're going to talk about Warhammer the Old World. And if you haven't watched Inside Tabletop before, my name's Ash. This is Chris. We're a couple of guys that have worked in the tabletop industry for, combined 50 years. So I've been in tabletops for 25 years. You've been just over 20. Yeah. You've owned your own independent retailer for 10 years. You worked in Games Workshop retail for 10 years before that. I've been in the digital tabletop space writing books and working for game companies and doing marketing for 10 years. And then before that, I was with Workshop for 15 years. 2000. And then, we've had this thing where we've been talking about someone that we all dated. A little game called Warhammer.
Yeah.
Warhammer the Old World. And feeling lately like we're not allowed to talk about it because we don't understand where it is today. And that we're not allowed to have an opinion about it. And we wanted to do like a 1-year update on Warhammer the Old World because we talked about it. It's been up for a year now. January 2024 is when it came out. And what we see, but then we had this moment of like, are we allowed to do this?
Yeah.
Are we allowed to do this? Because it feels like some of the sentiment when we do talk about it is, well, you don't know. You don't really know. You don't really see it. You don't
love my girlfriend anymore, so why are you talking about her that way?
That's right. Why are you talking about her that way? She's changed.
You're like hands go up immediately. They're like, whoa, hey, whoa, buddy, whoa. I was there for a while.
That's right. I did my time.
I have some experiences.
I did my time. And so, we're going to talk about that today, where it is a year later, because, man, some really interesting patterns have emerged with, the communities that I've interacted with, my friends who are, super actively playing it. Yeah. Because I have a ton of friends who are, really actively playing it. You've had all of your retailer experiences with it where it's selling really well. All the product that comes in and comes out, it's just gone. You don't have it on your shelf for the most part.
Maybe I might just say, really well, but it sells.
It sells. Well, yeah, sure. It's not. How about this? It's not.
You're very enthusiastic with your really. I
didn't mean to hyperbolize.
Jay would be really upset if you got away with that.
Fair enough. It's not. What I'm saying is, it's not rotting like Team Yankee the back of your store. Ooh, yeah. Sorry, did I call it Team Yankey there?
Where's War Machine though? I don't know.
We're still looking for War Machine. We also dated that girl. We also both dated that girl. He disappeared after a while, though.
So many exes.
That's right. I got a lot of exes in the miniature wargaming industry. But I think that is an interesting thing to talk about a year later, and I really wanted to get your opinion on it because we have different sides of it. Mm-hmm. And it started off in a certain way. So maybe we'll do this timeline-wise, my opinion and your opinion, and talk about our history with it. Because both you and I, Warhammer Fantasy was the game we played more than Warhammer 40,000. We were both active in the tournament community, the Hall of Heroes here in Canada, which was a big Warhammer tournament scene. And I played Warhammer 5th edition through until 8th edition. Before, obviously, it was, reduced for the old world and stuff like that. Yeah. What's your experience in that timeline?
Yeah, I probably played it the most 6th to 8th, probably. Mm-hmm. Pretty regular player. Yeah. 8th, I played, to death. Probably,
we're
talking a couple games a week,
Yeah, and you guys were
we traveled to play.
Yeah, you guys
all
traveled
over the place,
to
upstate New York.
Upstate New York.
I had a blast playing it. We were just super into it.
What was the circuit called back then?
Oh, yeah. There was a name for it.
It was a name for it. It was because it wasn't Frontline's.
No.
It wasn't Frontline's thing for 40K.
Yeah,
there was I completely.
It's amazing how that's just gone out of my memory.
But it was ranked.
Such a huge thing. Yeah.
There was online rankings. You guys were
all the big events had you get points.
Hard
and stuff.
Boys?
No,
that was the 40K one.
That was the trade one.
Yeah. It was the 40K one. Hard Boys.
No, but there was some organized play stuff for it, which was cool. Yeah.
And it was ranked and tracked, and you guys were the top ranked Canadian players for a while, and you guys would go to all these different events. God, I can't remember because remember it had its own composition rules, you couldn't take multiple hydras.
Oh my God, that used to drive us nuts too. It was so funny.
There was tons of comp rules in 8th edition Warhammer Fantasy Battle where they tried to fix the game that Workshop was breaking.
Yeah.
So What was the one you couldn't take certain banner combinations? Like you couldn't take a Lariel.
It was like
the banner, the World Dragon,
and like
a unit of Phoenix Guard,
but also in the same army with like a Frost Phoenix, and
Phoenix.
It was like it'd be like 0 to 1s of these things.
Yeah, they would 0 to 1 it all out. Yeah, because
you can't have a cannon and a steam tank.
No,
and a warp.
It's too many cannons. It's too many cannons and too many worlds at the same time. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But just to kind of give some context as to how much we played this.
Yeah.
I think that's the important thing to talk about where we're interested in it still. Like I want to see the epilogue to this story. I want to see where it went and what happened to it. And I'm emotionally invested. And I think that's maybe where we get some flack is it feels like we don't care enough and we're like throwing stones from the sidelines. I care very deeply because like I have all of my collections of Warhammer miniatures still.
Right.
Those were like my keeper armies. And I know you got rid of a lot of yours, but like I care, like it's funny. There was a story once where one of the old Games Workshop like execs when I was there, a guy named John Stoward who runs Warlord Games now.
Yeah.
He's a wonderful public speaker, and if you've ever heard John speak, he's done some podcasts recently, and of course he's more reserved and quiet now. But back when he was like marching around, kind of rallying the troops at Workshop, he was just a really good kind of like Churchillian sort of speaker.
Right.
And I remember him telling a story once about how, like, what it means to like build a Warhammer army, and his like take on it was, and he was talking to another guy. There's another guy on stage, a guy named Chris Harbour, when he was giving this speech, and he said, "If I loan Chris Harbour my copy of Call of Duty, because this is like Call of Duty 1 era when this is happening, and he doesn't give it back to me, that's okay. Like, I might never see that game again. I've played it. I've enjoyed it. I had a good time. The amount of investment I have into this game, I've gotten my money's worth out of. If I never see that Xbox game again, I don't care. If I loan Chris Harbour my Empire army and it's not back in 24 hours, I'm going to burn his house down." and that really summed it up for me, where it was like, yeah, you know what? That is because you've put this time and effort and investment into building a Warhammer army, and so you care a lot about it. And I think that still rings true today because Warhammer armies didn't get any smaller.
No.
They're a bit smaller, but like you're painting a couple hundred models to play like a standard size game of Warhammer. And I think some of the critiques of this edition, which we'll talk about a bit later, are actually kind of based on that. On the fact that certain units that you have to put the most time and painting into, they don't feel great to play with.
No, they're like the worst.
And they're like the worst. They're just the worst. So yeah, let's talk about the beginning. Let's talk about last year around this time. Who is excited in your life about Warhammer the Old World?
We're talking about like the launch month?
Yeah, like the build up. You know what I mean? Like it's going in December.
Oh, build up first. Okay.
Like the build up first. Like who's like lining up at your store to come buy their Khemri and their Bretonnian boxes?
It kind of came in waves because like there was this like pre-information time when like a lot of people were excited because we didn't know exactly what it was going to be. Mm-hmm. And then when like the really hard kind of information came out that it was going to be a lot of like a remastering or repackaging of like old kits that you loved, and they're going to make some new rules, but it's really going to be like a greatest hits of Warhammer. It's not like it's a new game, but it also is kind of an old game. It's like this weird mishmash kind of. I like calling it the greatest hits because it's kind of like I think
that feels better a little bit.
It feels better, yeah. And people's attitudes changed when like different information came out. So like for example, I put myself in the category of greatly disappointed when I found out that it was going to be just like relaunches of old models. I was really hoping for like more than that, something new, I guess, right?
Yeah.
As someone who, like you said before, we played it, we collected it, we painted all these models before. Putting out the same stuff again just wasn't exciting in comparison to the other things that are out there right now, right? And I think a lot of people were in that category, but I think for when some people started to see that, a new group of people got excited that like it was going to be their old models again, and they could bring them out and feel good about it, and that was going to be okay. And so, and then there's like the other group of people that felt like they missed out on something. I think that's probably the group that's the most worth talking about. The people that played Total War 1 in 2015 or Total War 2 in 2019 or 2018 or whatever when it came out, fell in love with the Warhammer Old World.
Yeah.
And
that setting,
feel like they missed out on something.
Yeah.
Like truly missed out on something, right?
Never got the chance to play Warhammer because it went away before they could actually play it.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that's if I was targeting a group with thinking like who Games Workshop was actually trying to sell to, that seems to me like the most obvious group that they
because they'd fired all their customers, right? They'd fired all their customers with like the switch over to Age of Sigmar. They'd actively like sort of, I don't know, like disenfranchise them, but they said like, well, here's the new thing, come along or don't.
Yeah.
Right. And so because of that, I think when they started looking to make something new, they were like, no, we want the legacy customers that didn't feel that way when it ended, like the ones that are just excited to get their model collections out again. And then we want these new people that never got to try it.
Yeah. And I'd say on launch of the product, that's who showed up. Right?
Agreed. 100%.
Yeah, 100% who showed up, right?
Yep. That's who showed up here.
Yeah.
Right. It was like the Knicks and the younger guys who never really got a chance to play it. They're playing 40K at the time. Like guys in their 20s who were like, oh yeah, cool. I get to finally do this. Cause like for you and me, that time skip is 8 years, 9 years.
Big time. Yeah.
That's a long time in the life of most people's hobbies. Like I get that for you and I now we're middle-aged.
And we've been doing the hobby 30 years. I know, I have accepted it.
We both had hernias now. We both had hernias now. So we know what that's like.
I started the damage a year ago with that middle-aged talk, and I've really come to accept my place now.
Yeah. We've both been more active in the gym because of it. But I do think that's the realizing like 8 years went by so fast.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Like there are people who are actively just never having gotten to participate in this that are excited to come back and participate in it.
It's easy to forget that, like, when you're in the hobby for like 3 decades or longer in your case, even, that like, that's a thing. Like there's people that didn't experience those old things and missed out on something magical. And I don't take that for granted, but I'm like, I had my magical moments, for that decade or whatever, where I played Warhammer Fantasy. And that's what a lot of the guys don't understand. We'll get to it, I guess, in the video here a little longer later. But that's what a lot of them, I think, don't understand about my point of view is that, like, they don't understand, quite frankly, that, like, the thing that they're loving so much right now is the thing I did and went through so much before.
Yeah.
Right?
And well, here's the other half of it. I think a lot of people that showed up in the beginning, what they wanted wasn't a Warhammer game. What they wanted was to feel the experience that they felt at that time in their life 8 years ago. And that's a hard thing for a game to give you. That's a really hard thing for a game to give you to say, like, we're going to make you 22 again or 25 again.
We're going to release a Pokemon set, and it's going to be the classic 151 characters.
Woo!
And all of a sudden, 40-year-olds are like, I love this.
That's it, right? Because you're getting like a little dopamine hit of like what it felt like to be 25 again. Yeah. 8 years is a long time. So like everybody wants to feel that, I think, again, when they go into it. And so I think what's interesting to talk about today is we're a year later. Well, what's that kind of like turned into? What's that manifested as far as like a community? And we don't have to like, it doesn't have to be like precise, because what we're talking about is where did our people end up in that mix when it was all said and done? The people coming into your store, my friends who are playing Warhammer, because like my best sort of like two of my closest gaming friends, obviously I have a podcast with them, we play Infinity together. They weren't excited about it at the beginning.
Okay.
But the community in Calgary got excited about it. They decided, well, I guess I'll go try and do this. Mm-hmm. And then because they had access to 3D printers, they then built 25 armies of unlimited miniatures and decided to go and try and break the game. And got really deep into it.
Right.
With like corner cases and magic, and like did exactly what I think a lot of people wanted from that game, which was tournament it as hard as possible. Like you and I were doing at the end of 8th edition. Right? Like it basically picking up 8 years ago, where it's like, no, we will only play it this way. We'll play it as hard as we can. There's no comp. There's no rules. We just go hard into the paint. And I've gotten to like vicariously live that experience through them and watch their like journey through that, because the 3D printer really changes Warhammer. Unlimited miniatures all the time that come out assembled, that you then just put on bases, spray, or even print the bases onto, spray, stick on movement trays, play games with. There's way less of a blood price to Warhammer all of a sudden. And it can be way more casual.
I think like it's worth mentioning too that this is probably one of the only cases where like I won't say all of them, but like a good chunk of these companies making like, different Tomb King miniatures or whatever, oftentimes their stuff looks better than Games Workshop.
100%.
And you're like, well, how often does that happen?
Right. Because
what industry does the 3D printer have the edge on Games Workshop in? Right.
So let's move forward in time a little bit. We got these expectant people. Let's talk about the middle ground. What did it develop into? So I'm gonna give my experience first because we had you go first this time. I back up basically everything you say about your beginning conversation there of like where did it start off at. In the middle, what I found was there was kind of three categories of people's expectations. There was the old school gamer who's like, I get to play my Warhammer again, and they're coming into it kind of just rules out of the rule book, casually interacting with it, putting their stuff on the table, playing with it. There was those were catching up to the original gamers, people that you were talking about, the Warhammer Total War, where they're building their first armies.
Yes.
They're engaging with it the way Games Workshop's presenting it. Right? Which is to say they're buying the Games Workshop miniatures, they're paying the Games Workshop miniatures, they're playing the game the way they see it being played by these old school gamers. And then there's the people who are fully in the modern miniature wargaming world who say, cool, here's a rule book.
Yep.
And some army lists, and I have access to the infinite sea of STLs and Patrons, and I can skip right to the end of the hobby process and just print an army in a weekend, spray paint it, dry brush it, and be playing on the table.
Yep.
And all three of these groups are now interacting at the same time. Are commingling.
Yeah.
And I think regionally what you see is you see a very different, I don't think there's one homogenized experience. I think every based upon the mix of how those people appeared in the regions as the game went through its first 6 months, basically, that's kind of dictated where it's gone. Because I've heard of gaming stores where it came back and immediately fizzled out because of that.
Yep.
Games where it's become like a third pillar, like it's like Warhammer, Age of Sigmar, this game, and maybe it's overtaken Age of Sigmar. Right, it's just become massively huge, and they're selling tons of kits, and they've done that hard work that we talked about at the beginning, where it's like they curated their AOS section to be like,
right.
Hey, these are all these Chaos Warriors are all compatible for your Chaos Warrior army, and blah blah blah. And then we have this like, no, we're going to turn it into a competitive tournament game, and we're going to write our own FAQs and do that thing that you and I talked that pick it up at the end of 8th edition thing, where it's like, no, we'll fix the game for Games Workshop because they don't seem interested in creating this perfect game, and then. That was my experience that I watched unfold with Owen and Dan, where they were like, fuck yeah, dragons. Dragons are great. You know what's better than one dragon? 2 dragons. You know what beats it? And then it became, what beats a dragon? Oh, these infinitely high wall spells beat a dragon. So then I just take nothing but wizards that can cast these infinitely high wall spells, because it became like, what's super powerful? Oh, now everybody's taking what's super powerful.
Right.
What's the rock to that scissors? So it became these like, and it's like, I just have these wizards now and I play it. And that escalation arm race of how could each of these individual army lists interact with that core principle of what's the big monster or what's my ability to like counteract the big monster was the exploration process for them. And because they had access to 3D printers, there was no limit to
there's no barriers
chasing that.
Plus they're ahead of the release curve because Games Workshop's obviously been sprinkling out the releases. We're only at like Army 6 of 9, I think.
Yep.
On the chain, so there's still 3 more to come that they've committed to releasing. And if you have the 3D printer magic, you can just kind of skip ahead, and it's a hack, right? Like you can literally like if other people are committed to doing it the kind of old-fashioned way, and doing it like the way that Games Workshop intends, which is you to buy their products and build it and paint it. And
think about those other 2 camps that are following at the Games Workshop pace, but they're commingling both online in the online discourse and maybe in real life, in which because the real life imitates the online discourse very often in games like Warhammer, and it did before, right? Before the Age of Sigmar thing. They're all having to interact with each other all of a sudden. And I think that's so I think the experience Owen and Dan had seems to be the thing that a lot of the like media for this, like the podcasts and the, commentaries of like what the army books and stuff are doing, seems to be going in that direction of like, no, make it a competitive game, push it towards what Age of Sigmar and Warhammer 40,000 are.
Right.
Make it modern, right? Make it a modern game. And you have this creaky old rule set that's having to like be pulled into that.
Well, and that's world. The funny thing is it's like written like it's like a Horus Heresy, where it's like we kind of just wanted to put the rules out there and like let it be.
Yep.
Right. And so it's Whereas like the Horus Heresy guys for the most part, like you're going to have there's a small group of them that like want to just run tournaments and like whatever. But for the most part, a lot of them are just like, I'm happy to play my stories.
It's
do my cool thing.
Yeah,
it's very self-policing. People are happy it doesn't change very often. That's actually one of the things they like about it.
Especially when there's the length of time required to make the armies.
Yeah.
Having it be the same when you start paying the army to having it being the same when you finish paying the army is a huge deal.
Yeah. So that's interesting, like how the community for Warhammer Old World is kind of like, it's funny because it's flipped so much. Like we would often complain about the lack of updates, 15 years ago and be like, I wish it was updated more. And now we're totally in a situation where like people are like, stop updating it so much or whatever. But now the Old World guys are kind of back where they were again, where they're like, they want like the updates, they want the FAQs, they want the points changes, they want things to be balanced. And so it's kind of funny how things like yin and yang like that,
well, I think it's what is the predominant mindset. And it was just really interesting to see Warhammer come up out of the ground like overnight in like a complete form, basically, because they released all these armies, 9 armies at the same time, plus the rule set. And everybody go, oh, well then we all get to fight to decide what this is going to be now. And you have these kind of 3 different cultures, one of which doesn't know anything and is trying to like decide which of the other 2 are right. One which is like the classic Warhammer player who's like a little more like hobby focused and a little less concerned with the outcomes of the games. And then this modern wargamer entering the fray with access to things like 3D printing being like, this is we need to update this monthly and we need to like curate like tournament results.
And how often does Games Workshop release something where they don't release something and give an opportunity to a third party business to basically like make 100% of the market money for a year and a half? Like Wood Elves, Beastmen, what's left? Wood Elves, Beastmen, and is that it?
Wood Elves, Beastmen, and no, I think they've done everything.
Oh, maybe they've done 7 out of 9. Okay,
they started with
House
2.
was 7. Sorry, technically they're out next week. So,
because it was I just reviewed the House, so it was Cambrian and whatchamacallit, Cambrian, Bretonnians. They've done they just did Empire,
Dwarves,
Orcs,
Warriors
of Chaos, and House. That's 7. Yeah, there's 7 out of 9 right now. 7 out of 9.
So for over a year, 3D printing companies have had exclusive rights to print Wood Elves or whatever and make all the money off of a game, right? Like it's kind of crazy. Like that doesn't really happen with GW very often.
Yeah. And then the flip side of that is they seem totally content by it.
Yeah.
They don't seem to be shutting anybody down.
I can shed a little bit of light into that. I think it's just kind of interesting. Based on my experience at the retail side and seeing how the customers are coming in and wanting to interact with it, I think it's played out pretty much how they thought it would, in the sense that number one, there were customers that just stopped being customers for almost 10 years.
Sure.
Like, that's a really interesting phenomenon because, like, how many other games are like that? Like, where they just, like, you stop playing 40K and you just, like, quit the hobby altogether? Like, that doesn't actually happen. Like, usually people jump into other things or... so people just stopped doing the hobby.
Or they hobbied at the exact point that you left them at, like a time capsule. They might play once a year. The collections didn't go anywhere. They didn't change. But
so these people literally came out of the past into the hobby store like last year.
They're Brendan Frasering out of their
literally. You're just like, oh, hey, I remember you because I was around then too. What's going on? And I see all these people from the road or whatever playing and it's funny to see those relationships start up again. But they stopped hobbying for like a decade. And Games Workshop was right. They came back and they're spending money in the ecosystem again. Now, they might not be buying all Games Workshop stuff. Maybe they're using a lot of their old stuff. But if they buy a model here, an Arcane Journal or whatever they're called, they've gotten some money that they never would have seen again. And I think that's primarily worked. And then the other thing is there's just like, we go back to that, like there's people in the that feel like they missed out. There's a percentage of those people that were never going to do the 3D printing thing.
Right.
They like the licensed, legit Games Workshop models because that's just what they like.
They might even have some like legacy programming in their brains where like, is this really Warhammer if I'm not playing it with Warhammer miniatures?
Sure.
Can I go to the shops and play with it?
And that's a concern. Like, not every shop's going to be like, yeah, I'm super excited for you to bring your army that you didn't buy here in the store all the time. Like, hi.
You better buy an airbrush.
You better buy something, man. Yeah, you're on thin ice. That's right. The ice is thin underneath you. Right, yeah. And those people are buying into the models. Like they're spending money. they're buying the battalions, they're buying kits, they're excited to start a Warhammer army for the first time because they missed out.
And that's so now we're at that end stage. Who do you think's winning of those different camps? Like the ones that are just kind of following it, like along at the workshop pace of release, the old school gamers. Because I'll be honest, of my friends that were really excited for Warhammer to come back that had existing armies, they seem to have, if they don't have an interest in that high level competitive tournament play, they don't seem to have maintained their interest in that same frenzy. And here's a bunch of reasons why rules wise. If you are going to play at that like win-lose extreme level, the thing that you spend the most time painting in Warhammer, which is infantry,
5-point infantry,
the worst things in this edition of Warhammer.
Just the worst.
They don't
Wear
run,
your shoes.
They die. There's no because there's no step up into rank, so like they die and they don't fight.
All the great benefits they got in 8th edition that made them cool and like kill things
and made you feel good about having painted 100 of them
are taken away. Yeah,
are taken away
right back to old school.
And what's funny is that was also the thing that Workshop kind of got right at the end of 8th edition, where it's like, well, no, they're spending the most money on this thing. Yes. It should be good.
Yeah.
And also, it was the backbone of medieval combat. Like, so cavalry are great at breaking infantry until there's too many infantry and the horses block down, or the infantry have spears or pikes or whatever it ends up being, right? Like, it was always an arms race of like who could do what. So it's interesting how like unless you really update your old Warhammer army, it kind of makes your old Warhammer army feel incompatible with being aggressively competitive in the new edition. And that's because the new edition is a little more like 5th edition, where dragons and heroes and like high level mages and stuff can have an undue influence on the game. Not necessarily from the point of view of killing units, but in just controlling what happens. And cavalry are fantastic. Yep. They're a lot better than they used to be. They've been put into a place of significance. Ask Bretonian players.
Flying cavalry is even better.
Flying cavalry is really better. Dragons are even better.
Go anywhere they want. They're a 40k unit in Warhammer.
That's
they just kind of go like
skirmish,
this.
Yeah, they fly. Well, I mean, that was always.
And you put a couple characters in there, and
that was 6th edition Beastmen. Remember where they played 40k and you played Warhammer.
Basically, what they're doing. Yeah.
We get rank bonuses, but we also skirmish. What is happening right now? Help. Also, all of our Mark of Tzeentch fighters are giving us a power dice for our 6th edition casting.
Yeah. So it's interesting the way you phrase it. Well, like there are these like very, I think it's a good way to put it. Like it's a community that's kind of like coming into it from all these different places. And
by nature of it being a legacy game.
Yeah. Like people that have been there before, people that are starting it new. And like you said, people are starting it new, but like not doing it the GW way, the traditional GW way, which I think is interesting as well.
Because you have these competing factors, right? Warhammer's never been more popular. You have a game that's a blast from the past, so it brings in your legacy customers who might not have been around for a long time. And you have all this modern convenience that didn't exist when Warhammer was at its height. You couldn't 3D print an entire Warhammer army at the end of 8th edition.
No.
Today you can.
Yep.
Today you can just go on the internet and beep boop your way and then set your printer and set your sizes and print them on bases and they just pop out. That's three things colliding that did not collide before in the previous version of the game, and it's fascinating to watch it happening. So who do you, in your store then, who's winning, I guess? Beat from the street.
Yeah, I mean, like...
in the online discourse, I'll tell you, it's the competitive guys. It's guys. It's the tournament-minded,
yeah.
And I see them fighting in all of the social media groups with the older school gamers to talk about who's right and who's wrong.
Right.
Like, I can't count the number of times where it's someone's complaining about the way a game went out because they took X or Y units and it seems too powerful and the game's unbalanced, the game's broken. And a legacy gamer from the older versions of Warhammer coming out and going like, so you deliberately set out to play an unfun game and had an unfun experience, feels like you got what you paid for. And those guys are banging into each other, right?
Right. Yeah, no, I think like... Obviously, like the people that are watching this probably have seen us talk about Old World before, and maybe have been on our channel where Jay and I talk about Old World, and they know that like we've been very critical and skeptical, and like so I'd say the like for our hobby shop, as much as we've supported it, brought in all the kits, we're selling it to people. The customers that come in and engage in our store understand that it's it's like, I don't want to say it's like a tenuous ground that the game is on. Like they know, like, look, this game went away before.
You're being cautious.
You know, like this is like, we lived through that. Like we saw that happen. It happened right in front of my eyes. I was there when 8th edition was pitched to us in a dark room with 100 other store managers, and we were yelled at and told that, like, this is it, guys. This is it. And I went back and I fought like hell to keep it alive. But
it went away anyway.
It went away anyways. So
I still have that copy of 8th edition. With the inscription.
Me too. Yeah.
We had to sign our copies of 8th edition that we got given.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I always have that. It's an awesome book. But so I think the customers understand that, like, look, this is here because, you know, you have to buy into it a little bit. You have to give a little bit of money. It's going back to the store thing. It's like, it's not exactly like our shop's going to be this like 3D printing ground for like people to like just do whatever they want.
Sure.
Right? So that's obviously like that third group or whatever is like not really fully represented in our shop, even though there are a couple of 3D print stuff or whatever. Like one of the guys is like playing Chaos Dwarves or something like that. And it's like, I don't sell Chaos Dwarves. I don't care if you 3D print them.
Go for it. Yeah.
Go ahead, knock yourself out. Right.
Here's some primer. And
yeah, exactly. He buys supplies and stuff. He gets it. He's one of the guys.
He's a customer.
Right?
Yeah,
he gets it. But so like they get it. Like they have like if you guys want this game to like succeed, you guys better like put in a little bit of effort. So we organize a league for them. They show up. They play in it.
Awesome.
Regular play. They're all good dudes. Like they all have different backgrounds. Like we talked about earlier. There's boxes they all check. You know, some of the guys had put the game down for 10 years and now they're back in the hobby. It's cool to see them again. Mm-hmm. Other ones were just playing other games and now they're back because this is the game they like.
Right.
And it's pretty. I mean, it's small. Like it's still very small. Like we're talking about like a handful of people, right? Mm-hmm. Like eight to 10 people that are like making up that ecosystem, right? And I think like a lot of the people, obviously because we're a store, like wanted to do it the classic way. Like they wanted to buy the new models. So like, and we were telling a lot of people this. They're like, "Oh, when are you going to run an old world event? When are you going to start running old world events?" I'm like, "I have a lot of space, and like I'm going to get like 6 people."
And there's also
because like
other people are running them.
People are building their armies, man. It takes time. So like that's one of the things we're experiencing. It took us like 6 to 8 months to even start running these leagues because like people are still building the stuff. There's like the blood cost to doing it is high, right? So.
Unless you're skipping to the end.
Unless you're skipping to the end, right? In which case, like you're not really like in my.
Well, but that it's your one of these 3 families of people who are choosing to engage with it, and like I think that's it's so fast. That's why I like talking about it. It's so fascinating to me watching these different like almost like cultures inside this one game interacting with each other and like finding out who's coming out on top. So. I mean, we're almost at, and obviously they've already announced like they're going to do more army seasons. The legacy armies, of course, are going to get covered now and blah, blah, blah. It's been successful enough. Investors report mentioned like it did expectations or above expectations. Yeah. And of course it did. Yeah. Because it's got everything possible going for it. And also your brand is growing at the same time exponentially. Of course. And I think we can't count that out.
No.
The brand itself getting bigger is going to have a knock-on effect where it's going to sell more. But Kill Team is still selling more than it is, right? Kill Team is still the next biggest thing after Age of Sigmar. And that's just because it's just more Warhammer 40,000.
It's just more Warhammer 40,000, yeah.
So I don't think, what they did was they just made another extra bucket to put the money in.
That's right, yeah.
So if Age of Sigmar, if Warhammer the Old World is its own little bucket of money, which is great, and the bucket's filling more than they thought it would, fantastic. Mm-hmm. The community's kind of deciding what it wants to be, but the game isn't necessarily following that pattern. They're not doing monthly updates and balance updates, and they're not doing War Scroll battle. Like the interesting thing for us to talk about, I guess, at the end of this is, do you think in phase 2 that's going to happen? Do you think in the 2020 we get through these next 2 books, right? They finish off Wood Elves and Beastmen. Because the Beastmen are all going to get repackaged hilariously from their AOS packaging and be 10% more, or whatever it ends up being 20% more dollar-wise, because they're in blue boxes. What do you think the next phase is going to be? Do you think they put a team together and go like, here's your balance updates, here's your official way to play? Or do you think they just leave it exactly where it is and just hit the next 9 armies?
if I was betting on it, I think they're very aware of what the design kind of intention. Like I definitely see it more like a Horus Heresy, where they purposefully don't want to commit the same level of resources to it as they commit to like Age of Sigmar and 40K. And I think that's a good thing, because like I think that means it has like a place in the ecosystem. I think it means what it's going to get is it's going to get like sporadic releases throughout the year. It's not going to feel like AOS, where it's like every month you can expect something to come out. Or
it won't fast track this time too, because the launch had 2 of those things in it. Yeah. Right. So if when they start the next one, unless they do
a new box set or something, right? Like which
they might do. They might do launch boxes for the new phase, right? With like an army style box like they had for the Bretonians and the Tomb Kings. So,
but I think you have to ask the question is like, where is the money coming from? Who are the people buying the figures? 'Cause that's all they really care about. It's like they don't care that more people are 3D printing armies and playing the game. Like, I'm sorry to break hearts or whatever out there. They don't. So who are buying the models? What's the demographic? What age are we talking here? And I think that the older you get up in the demographic, the more you want things to kind of stay a bit more the same for longer, right? Like, you don't want to be part of this fast-paced changing culture. You want your minis to kind of last and like not have to make constant changes to your army list. You want to be able to play with your mates every couple months and have things more or less be the same, like the Horus Heresy, like Necromunda, like those games. You know,
I would agree that at least one camp inside that camp wants that,
right? But like, which camp is the one that's actually buying things from Games Workshop?
That's middle one, only the middle,
right?
One.
So,
right, because like the people with 3D printing aren't the people that already have armies. Aren't to the same level that the people in the middle are.
Yeah. So,
and the question is,
what do they want? What do they want?
Well,
right?
And I think that's the war.
Yeah.
It's, are they going to this one side, the super competitive side, or are they going to this legacy gamer side? And I think that's really the question for the next year is, it's the two wolves thing, right? Which one's Games Workshop feeding? I think they're going to feed the legacy ones. I think you're right. I don't think they're going to feed the tournament guys.
I don't think so, yeah.
Because they just don't want to put the effort in.
No,
it's not worth.
I think it's literally that cut and dry, right? It's like because with greater effort comes greater risk, right? And that's exactly what got them into this.
And they have to own it. They have to own it forever. They have to keep doing it. Once you start doing it, you have to keep doing it. If you let the community sort it out for themselves, then you're sort of absolved from the responsibility of doing it.
Jay's funny thing, he always does this with the guys. He's like, you know, when all this stuff's kind of released or whatever, he's just sort of like, so what now, guys?
What's next?
What now?
Yeah, what happens after
this? He says it like ironically, where he's just like, what are you excited about? Like, what is there to be excited about? Like, you know, it's like
when all the armies are done,
right? Like,
then what are they going to do?
Like, you know, they put a mini out here, mini out, like, but like I think like some people are okay with that. That's fine.
I think it'll be completely fine.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's funny because Warhammer: The Old World came out in the state that it took 5 years for Necromunda to get to, when they did the like Gangs of the Underhigh. You know what I mean? Like, we're like, it's all compiled into the one, compilation book, but it launched in that state.
Yeah.
So they don't have army books. They don't have individual products to sell you. So unless they go backwards and they're like, well, we're going to do a new edition of the rule book, and now we're going to start doing army books again and individual model releases, like, but then they're just back into doing old Warhammer.
Yeah.
They're doing it the old way again. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. I don't know.
I don't see that happening. I don't see that happening.
Yeah.
But I do see them making a lot more Kill Team stuff, because that's the going to the Warhammer 40K bucket never seems to get old, and people are slopping that up. They love that slop. They love that
Some things
delicious,
never change.
Delicious 40K slop. Yeah. It's still eating Warhammer's lunch 8 years later, just in a different mode now, in a smaller, more timely mode.
Wait, what year did it come out again? Was it 1988?
88 is 40K.
88 or 89, yeah.
88 is 40K.
I mean, that's the day they started eating their lunch, and it's never
really ended.
They have these great YouTube videos of like the original guys on, you know, just talking about the old days and stuff like that, and how they were having this conversation 30 years ago, like in the 90s, about how like, what do we do about Warhammer Fantasy? It's like not selling like 40K. It's like, it's almost like, they're like looking at it as a problem, but like instead of just being like, wow, what an incredible success!
What an incredible
40K
success
is.
we've had. Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like
look at how
that's really what it is, right?
We've sold a male power fantasy to men.
Yeah, whoa.
Fantastic. Yeah. Whoa, shocking that worked. Yeah. shocking that men can get suckered into buying a male power fantasy. Whoa,
I have the power.
What else is new? So original and surprising.
But yeah, I think that's where it's at. I think.
Yeah, me too. I think it's going to be interesting to see how people react to this video, because it kind of feels like a nothing that we just talked about, but I do see the attrition that the intersection of these three things, right? Modern gaming and 3D printing culture, the legacy gamers returning, and the people in the middle that are just kind of trying to follow what Workshop's putting out there and how that's pulling them in all these different directions, right? And yeah, and I think that's why we won't see rapid, spectacular growth, is because the tension, the homeostasis between those three things, where they're all being pulled kind of equally towards each other, it makes it daunting. And you don't have this gap of 8 years of like people waiting for it to come back anymore, and then this outside recruitment. If we see another Total War game or another, like, I don't know, what's the Scaventide thing, like a Scaventide world, like if we see some kind of really big outside influence marketing happen, maybe then we get like an upsurge and stuff like that. But I think we've had Total War is not going to make any more new customers than it has. Not really. No. You know what I mean? Not to the point where it did in the beginning.
They're towards the end of their
their cycle. They're Dawn of Warring out. I think is what's happening there. Not to say they're not great games. They're huge fans, and they're selling like a AAA title. Yeah. But there's a diminishing return always with this stuff. You can't go to the same well over and over and over again. Dawn of War couldn't do it, and that was with Warhammer 40K.
Yeah.
Space Marines only managed to do it because I think that you basically had them stand on the backs of like the 10 years in between those two games. Like 8-9 years in between games. That's a big gap in between AAA titles. Yeah. And you have all the marketing leading up to Space Marine 2 making it what it is. And Space Marine 3 will be, backed up by an Amazon TV show. That's really nuts. Yeah, it's gonna be a big thing. So yeah, I think if unless there's like a force majeure outside of it, it's going to stay exactly the same size that it is right now, and Workshop's going to be happy with that. Yep. Because that little bucket is filled up.
And I honestly wish, I hope that the community can be happy with that too. Because I
hope so too, and not want it to it's not going to make it 25 again.
It doesn't have to be 800 players at Adepticon.
It's not going to be
your game. Just you can get your 40 to 80. And you should be proud of that, and that's awesome.
And it's okay to be self-policed by the community to be competitive. Totally, if you want to be competitive, it's okay.
We did it for years. We did it for years. And
did it forever.
It was fine.
Did it forever.
Or just play the game raw, we always did that.
And accept the fact that 3D printers have changed wargaming, because unlimited miniatures all the time drastically skews against game designers. Right?
It does. Yeah.
Like you can find the cracks in anything. Tabletop Simulator does this too. When you have unlimited access to all miniatures all the time with minimal effort, it is a absolute nightmare for game designers to create balance, because inherently the time and effort and cost of making things is a thing that keeps games from cracking.
Yeah.
Because you can't just skew into something.
Well, and like you said, how they're sold even, right? Not everyone's going to collect 10,000 points of something. So if they buy a battalion and a couple of characters and a dragon and some cavalry, and they have their 2,000 point army or whatever, that's probably what they'll play with mostly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's where these legacy gamers are sitting, because they've paid that cost and want to climb that mountain again. Yeah. And they might not be interested in something like 3D printing. Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see where it goes. But thanks for doing the update. This is fun.
World talk.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, I think it's found, if I was to wrap this up, I think it's found its niche. I think it's found its pace. And I think the tension is coming from the end user, not from the company making it. I think the company making it's very satisfied with what it's doing. And I think the tension on what it should be now is the two wolves in that community that are duking it out a little bit. Yeah. And the people in between are the customers that will kind of decide its fate as to whether or not the purchasing keeps happening. Because you still need people trickling in. It has to keep happening.
And I'll end on this, but any small community is going to have its. We talked about this before too. Because people are so aware of how thin the margins are for their game, that you develop that like chip on your shoulder, and you just you want it to succeed. So you become protective, and then sometimes that leads to things being a bit gatekeepy. And like remember this with like the Horus Heresy guys, like they're almost like they're so casual, and they love the story so much that they're like anti-competitive in some ways. So they like really get aggressive against people that like try to break the rules and stuff like that, even though that's just their hobby and that's how they enjoy things. So like I think that's the thing you get with small communities always, though. It's like not everyone can be happy with how things are, but like.
And I think that's where we do get our right to make comments. is that we get to sit outside of it and look at the different people with their different agendas and their different likes and interests and go like, isn't this interesting? Because I don't care who wins. I have had my Warhammer experience, and I have had my Warhammer armies.
Sure.
And I don't think we're speaking negatively here. I think what we're doing is speaking subjectively about the current place that it sits in the market and who's excited about it. Right. Like, I think this is probably more of an investor relations conversation than it is a fan conversation. And I'm totally fine with that, because I've seen this movie. I want to see where this franchise goes. I love the original trilogy, and I'm excited to see where this franchise goes, but I also accept that it's probably not for me.
Right.
I can engage with it casually because I already have everything I need to play with it. And I'm not worried about it being this thing that like, it's, again, I know it's not going to make me 25 again.
No, that's
what everybody really wants.
That's
to play with it in Legacy Gamer. And what everyone really wants in this future thing is to get the experience that I had at 25 today. Yeah. Right. And have, or to modernize it and make it a game that it's not designed to be. It's not designed to be a modern war game. I don't think it's ever going to be one, guys. Sorry.
Yeah.
We're never going to stand in circles and push buttons with squares. The game's too square to be in circles. So where can people find you talking more shit about Warhammer the
Punching down on my channel, Lords of War Games and Hobbies. Yeah. Always punching down. Always picking people we can beat up. Yeah.
Always.
Never taking on the big guys.
That's right. Telling everybody to never stock it. I think people honestly think that that's what you're trying to do. And I don't.
We get some real angry people.
People,
every time we talk about it, just because like it's such a sense of, we did a whole episode about it like maybe 6 months ago, right?
Yeah.
Where we talked about
the Phantom X thing.
The Phantom X thing. It's a huge thing, right? Yeah. Like people are there's so much passion and emotion built up into it. But yeah, on our channel, and then sometimes we get dragged into the topic just from our Patreon people that want us to.
Just some current event stuff happening. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And that your Patreon is patreon.com/Lords of War Games and Hobbies. You can be part of the live garbage time, which we're about to go off and do, where we sit and talk to just take questions from the chat. This is all being filmed live in front of, I think there's 20, 25.
Live in front of a studio audience.
Live in front of a studio audience. And you can get in on that. We usually do these in one day, once a month, but there's also other various live things we do, like the Indie Hour and the Monday Hang. On my Patreon, which is patreon.com/Guerrilla Miniature Games. But if you're watching this live on YouTube, then you have them to thank for all this. So we'll see you for more Inside Tabletop as we break down various things in the tabletop game industry in the future. Thanks for coming in, man.
Yeah, it was always fun.
Thanks for watching, everybody.